Hello, everyone, and welcome to Critical Thinking Through English Composition. This is the second video that I'm posting on Cyber Campus. The first video is a review of the first three deductive arguments that we covered in Tuesday's class, as well as a look at three further deductive arguments, disjunctive, syllogism, dilemma, and reductio ad absurdum. Please watch that video first if you have not watched it already. This is the second video where I will be looking at the midterm exam by actually giving you some mock exam questions. And this will help us not only look at the possible question types for the midterm exam, but also give you a pretty good review of the basic principles we've looked at so far in the course. So let's get started. The first part of the midterm exam is a quick look at some of the general rules for arguments. This is the first part of the textbook, which you can see right here. I like to start the midterm exam off with a couple of questions that are quite simple. Students can get their toes wet in the pool before they jump in. So what I'll ask you to do is resolve premise and conclusion. At the beginning of the course, I mentioned that the most important thing you have to do when you look at somebody else's argument is try and figure out what point they're trying to make and distinguishing between the conclusion and the reasons they have for that conclusion. And in some cases, it's not always so easy, especially when this is done in a live setting. But in this case, I'm going to be giving you a quote which will probably be quite easy for you to distinguish between the premise or premises and the conclusion. So what I'll ask you to do is read the argument, identify the premise or premises, the conclusion, and also identify any indicator words, words that indicate a premise or conclusion. So let's say I give you this. This is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Racial segregation reduces some people to the status of things. Hence, segregation is morally wrong. So take a moment and think, okay, what is the premise? What is the conclusion? And are there any words here that indicate something as a premise or conclusion? You've probably guessed, after looking at this for just a moment, that the premise is racial segregation reduces some persons to the status of things, not human beings. As a result of this, the conclusion is segregation is morally wrong because it's morally unjust to reduce human beings to a non-human status. The indicator word here would be hence. Let's take a look at a second example. Here we go. Since many people don't realize that they drink more alcohol than is healthy for them, doctors ought to talk to their patients about alcohol consumption. All right, here, the premise is that many people don't realize that they drink more alcohol than is healthy for them. They're engaged in some kind of unhealthy activity. The conclusion is doctors ought to talk to their patients more about alcohol consumption. And our indicator word here is since. Since indicates a premise. All right, so I will probably give you a question like this, where you look at a short quote, and then you will write down the premise or premises, identify the conclusion, and then write down any indicator words, words that either indicate a premise or conclusion. Okay. One of the other general rules for arguments that we looked at the beginning of the course was to unfold your ideas in natural order. You want your argument to be something that people can either listen to or read and understand without much difficulty. Now, in some cases, people want to start with their conclusion first. Put it right out there. This is my conclusion, and then back it up with their reasons. Other times, this is especially true when people have a controversial a conclusion they want people to accept. They might start off with their premises, and they'll start off with the the easiest premise for their audience to accept, because they want the audience to follow step by step and agree with each one, and then have the conclusion at the end. So sort of lead the reader or the listener by the hand, give them premise by premise, and premise by premise, hopefully the person is following, saying, yes, I agree with these. And then at the end, showing a conclusion that the person might not have agreed with at the beginning, but now they feel they should accept it because premise by premise they have accepted. And if those premises can lead to a conclusion, you might actually have somebody accepting a conclusion that they might have rejected otherwise. Now, in this case, what I'll do is I'll give you a short argument, and I will have the premises and the conclusion all mixed up. And then I would like you to write them in a more natural order. So for example, here I have 6 different sentences. Having a machine control your heartbeat is a way bigger deal than having a microchip in your hand. A company in Sweden makes tiny microchips to implant in people's hands. The idea of implanting a microchip like that in your body makes a lot of people nervous. So people shouldn't be afraid of these microchips. With a wave of the hand, these microchips can communicate with nearby devices to do things like unlocking a door or paying for a purchase. But people have been implanting other devices like pacemakers to regulate heartbeat for a long time. Okay, now, if you want to take something like this, which sounds confusing when you read it because the premises and the conclusion are all jumbled up in an unnatural order, you might want to think, is there some sort of background that I need? Some sort of context to help me understand the issue? Then maybe tell me a little bit more, maybe what the problem is, and then lead me through to the conclusion. Now, what do you think would be a good order for here? First, try and think, well, is there a sentence here that is giving me some sort of background? What do I need to know before I go further? And then after that, give me some details about that issue, and then lead me through to the conclusion. By the way, if you're looking at this, you are probably thinking, okay, I know just in the first question, Mr. Barnard talked about indicator words. So I'm going to try and look for a word that indicates a conclusion. And you might say, aha, I see so. So people shouldn't be worried about these microchips. Okay, so that's probably going to be the last one. That should be the conclusion. That's probably going to come at the very end. What else is there? A company in Sweden makes tiny microchips to implant in people's hands. Oh, actually, this is giving me a little bit of background to the issue. This seems to be introducing what the topic is. A company in Sweden makes tiny microchips. This is something maybe people haven't heard of before. So there's this company in Sweden, and they put microchips in people's hands. Well, what do these microchips do? And why would people be worried about them? And from that, you can put together a pretty simple argument that looks at these 6 sentences in a very natural way. A company in Sweden makes tiny microchips to implant in people's hands. Okay, that gives us a little bit of context. It sets us up for what is going to come next. Well, what about these microchips? What do they do? With a wave of a hand, these microchips can communicate with nearby devices to do things like unlocking a door or paying for a purchase. Okay, well, that gives me a detail. Well, then what's the problem? The idea of implanting a microchip like that in your body makes a lot of people nervous. People might think this is a strange thing to do or something maybe that's dangerous. Now, what is a counter argument to that? Well, but people have been implanting other devices like pacemakers to regulate heartbeat for a long time. So having a machine control your heartbeat is a way bigger deal than having a microchip in your hand. You can see how the last few sentences work very well together. First, we find out what these microchips do. Then this makes people nervous, but the person doesn't think people should be nervous. So they give us a counter argument that comes in two pieces. The first one, it compares it to similar technology. You know, we have been implanting things like pacemakers in people's hearts for a long time to regulate their heartbeat. And then we get a comparison. Having a machine control your heartbeat is a much bigger deal than just having a microchip in your hand. Therefore, if you're not worried about having a pacemaker in your chest, you shouldn't have to worry about these microchips either. And that leads us quite smoothly to our conclusion. I'll give you a question like this on the test, lead a short argument, and then decide what would be the most natural order for the argument to be listed in. So try and think first, what is a sentence that will give us some sort of context? It's introducing the topic. Try to look for any indicator words, especially words that will indicate a conclusion. This will help you know, at the very least, what the last sentence will be. And then try and think of, is there a detail that is related to the context? It tells us about something. What is the argument that is trying to be made? Is it in support of something? Well, in that case, you're probably going to have a piece of information that will serve as a counter argument and also as a support for the argument. And try and decide which one should go first. Okay, next, moving on to zombies. Zombies. Love zombie movies. I think this is a clip from the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead, which was a remake of the 1968 George R. Romero classic. If you haven't seen them, strongly suggest you do. They're awesome. Now, you might be wondering, what do zombies have to do with the critical thinking midterm exam? Well, one of the most important rules for critical thinking is to start from reliable premises. When you make an argument, you have to make sure that your premises are reliable as possible. Will they be accepted by an argument? And even more important, are they truthful? When you look at someone else's argument, you also have to question the reliability of their premises. Are they highly reliable? Like, is it a controversial topic? Is it likely, is the statement based on something that there's a wide consensus on? Or is it relatively controversial? Is it truthful? Or is it quite obviously not truthful? Is it somewhat truthful? You have to sort of have a nuanced perspective. Very few premises are 100% ironclad, and very few are 100% ridiculously false. You have to take a judgment call. Now take a look at this. We have got a quote here. Anybody could become a zombie, a relative, a friend, or even a neighbor. Zombies are constantly looking to eat the brains of the living, and that's why you should always be prepared to escape from or fight back against a zombie attack. I've given you here a very, very easy example. If I want you to determine the reliability of certain premises, first you have to identify the premises, separate them from the conclusion, and then look at those premises and see how reliable they are. And I'd like you to construct an answer similar to this. So, premise number one, identified that. Anybody could become a zombie. Premise number two, zombies are constantly looking to eat the brains of the living. And this leads us to our conclusion. You should always be prepared to escape or fight back against a zombie attack. Now, in this case, the premises of the argument are highly unreliable, and I've made this example deliberately unreliable because it's widely known that zombies don't exist. There might be a small group of people who do believe in zombies, but it's not a controversial issue. There's a broad consensus that even the existence of zombies is scientifically impossible. And thus it's impossible for anyone to become a zombie, which means that premise number one is highly unreliable. And if there's no such thing as zombies, well, then it's false that zombies are constantly looking to eat the brains of the living. Any supposition of the eating habits of zombies is irrelevant, because zombies themselves don't exist. So in this case, both premises are highly unreliable, which therefore renders the conclusion unreliable as well. All right, now moving on to arguments by example. We took a look at how you can use examples in order to support your argument. You can't just make an argument without evidence, and there are many types of examples you can use in order to strengthen your argument. But one of the rules that we looked at was background rates. What background rates would you need to know in order to decide if a conclusion is accurate or not? Remember, without the background rates, it can be hard to determine if an argument is accurate or not. Let's take a look at this example. In the second half of 2010, the University of Western Ontario did not have a single car stolen on campus. The campus police must be doing an outstanding job of protecting the university. Okay, so in this case, we have a statistic being used as the premise. Not a single car was stolen on campus during the second half of 2010, which leads to the conclusion that the police must be doing an outstanding job protecting the university. But are the campus police, doing an outstanding job? Well, let's take a look at that premise. In the second half of 2010, they did not have a single car stolen from the campus, but what background rates would we need to know? Let's take a look. First, we need to know how many cars there are on campus. That way we can know the theft rate. Are there many cars on campus? If there are thousands of cars on campus and not a single one has been stolen, that's very different than having a campus that might be deserted. During COVID, for example, there would have been very, very few cars on campus. So it's much less impressive that there were no cars stolen. Second, we need to know the theft rate of cars in the surrounding area. Is this a high crime area? If it's a high crime area, but there are no cars being stolen, well, then the police are obviously doing a very good job during this time period. But it's not very significant if there have been no car thefts in the area. If you're in a very low crime rate area, it's not very significant if there's no car thefts on campus. Here's another example. In this case, it's an argument that is using a statistic in order to make a point, but I want you to explain why the number does not effectively support the conclusion. So, since the Egyptian revolution in 2011, the rich have fared much better than the poor in Egypt. The number of billionaires has doubled, while the average income per person only rose by 20%. This is based on a tweet from about 9 years ago. Now, in this case, we have a couple of statistics here. We've got the number of billionaires. This would be in the 5 years after the Egyptian revolution. The number of billionaires has doubled, but the average income per person only rose by 20%. These statistics are trying to support the argument that the rich in Egypt have benefited much more than the poor have in the 5 years since the Egyptian revolution. But how do these numbers not actually support the argument? Well, first, it only gives us the rate of increase, but not the total number of billionaires. If the number of billionaires doubled from 4 to 8, then the number is really too small to support the conclusion. And not only that, but the statistic does not tell us anything about the contrast between the rich and the poor in Egypt. Is there a very big divide between the richest and the poorest? We have the rich defined as billionaires, but we don't actually know how poor the poor are. What is the parameters of poor? How many dollars per day? A third problem is we don't know how rich the new billionaires were in 2010. Let's imagine that the people who became billionaires in the 5 years after the Egyptian revolution were almost billionaires before. You know, they had net personal wealth in excess of $800 million. In that case, perhaps some of them were so rich that a 20% increase in income took them from multimillionaires to billionaires, in which case it still doesn't support the argument that the rich have done much better than the poor. Okay, arguments by analogy. This is the section that gave students last year in the fall of 2024 probably the biggest trouble. And if you take a look at my previous lecture after the deductive arguments, I talked about analogies there as well, and I give some examples from last semester where students, they really struggled with trying to make an analogy where the two things were relevantly similar, and the relative similarities should be stronger than any relative differences. Remember, whenever you say that A is like B, they're not going to be exactly the same. There will be differences, and there will obviously be some that are relevant. But what you want is an analogy to have two things that are relevantly similar in some way to make some kind of point. And if it can strongly make that point, if the relevant similarities are very clear for the purpose of the analogy, that's what makes it strong. But if there are very, very obvious and glaring differences, then it probably means it's a relatively weak analogy. So I will ask you on the midterm exam to choose an unfinished analogy. I'll give you a short list, and I'll ask you to choose one, then complete it, and then describe why the relevant similarities are more significant than the differences. You can go back to the assignment where I had you evaluate an analogy, our second writing assignment. That's a good example for you to check if you want to know how to prepare on the midterm exam for this question. So I might ask, like, creating romantic relationships are like something, or creating a national immigration policy for a country is like something, or trying to accomplish a long-term goal is like something. Of course, I will not be using any of these specific examples, but you can see what I'm getting at. And if you take a look at my previous lecture, I give other examples of unfinished analogies, and also some of the ways that students tried to complete them. By the way, once again, I have to mention Dr. Gabor Mate, the physician, who I think made one of the greatest analogies when he stated that if you want to learn about human nature, you have to take a look at how human beings evolved over a long period of time, and that looking at modern human society is not a very good way to learn about the nature of humanity, because the way we live in modern society is very different from how we have lived for most of human history. And he says if you want to learn about the nature of an elephant, you wouldn't look at how elephants behave in a zoo, because it's a very unnatural environment, completely different from how the species evolved. Likewise, if you want to learn about human nature, you really shouldn't look at modern society, because this lifestyle that we have now is radically different from how we evolved over most of the history of our species. Good on you, Gabor Mate. All right, arguments from authority. I might give you a short question about this. In this case, I will give you a short argument that cites a source, and I want you just to tell me how well the source is cited. So take a look here. Evaluate how well the argument follows the rules for citing sources. This is rules 13 through 16. So yeah, take a look in the textbook here. Yeah, citing your sources, seeking informed sources. Is it informed? Yeah, impartial. Is it cross-checked? Okay. World-famous physicist Stephen Hawking gave a speech at the 17th International Conference on Relativity and Gravitation at Oxford University in July 2004. In front of 700 people, Professor Hawking admitted that he had been wrong about black holes. He had long believed that the extreme gravity in black holes somehow destroyed all the information that entered black holes. Professor Hawking now says that black holes do not completely destroy information. Okay, well, we clearly know when and where this was taken, which is good. We not only get the name of the conference, but we get the location and the date. The argument does a pretty good job of following the rules. Yeah, it tells us where and when. We know that Professor Hawking is, or was, an expert on black holes. And it doesn't seem likely that he would be benefiting from admitting that he's been wrong. I don't think there's any profit motive here. The only problem is that the argument here doesn't cross-check the claim. So we're not sure if this is something which is widely agreed upon by black hole physicists or not. Other than that, really well done. Arguments about causes. This is one of the last things that we looked at before deductive arguments. Now, you might remember I gave this example in class. Indians, or South Asians, who eat foods containing a lot of turmeric have a much lower incidence of Alzheimer's disease than do Americans. Most Americans do not eat much turmeric. That is, there's an inverse correlation between eating turmeric and developing Alzheimer's. So the higher the amount of turmeric that is being eaten, the lower the rate of Alzheimer's. The lower the amount of turmeric eaten, apparently the higher rate of Alzheimer's. It's an inverse correlation. Now, when I gave students a few examples of different correlations, and I wanted them to, or I asked you to brainstorm one and then list different possible explanations. Remember, if you don't know the cause for something, it's a good idea to try and brainstorm as many possible options as possible, and then try to choose maybe the most likely one. Perhaps A causes B, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's B causes A, or maybe it's C, another factor that is causing both A and B. Or maybe A is just one of several factors which combine in order to create C, or to create B. Or perhaps these two things, although they're correlated, are simply a coincidence. On the midterm exam, I will give you a short argument, and I would like you to list 3 possible explanations and then identify the most likely one. Okay, just to give you an example of 3 possible explanations for this one. Perhaps turmeric contains a special vitamin or mineral that protects people against Alzheimer's. A causes B. Special vitamin in turmeric causes people to get less Alzheimer's disease, protects them. That's A causes B. Alternatively, there may be a genetic trait that is common among Indians or South Asians, but not Americans, and that causes people to like the taste of turmeric and have a lower chance of developing Alzheimer's. So this could be C causing A and B. There's a genetic trait that causes people to like turmeric and eat more of it, and that same genetic trait might cause people to also come down with Alzheimer's at lower rates. Or it could just be a coincidence. One difference in food culture between Americans and Indians, the consumption of turmeric, causes the disparity in Alzheimer's. Let me say that again. One difference in food culture between Americans and Indians causes the disparity in turmeric consumption, and some other unrelated difference causes the disparity in Alzheimer's rates. I would identify the third one here as probably the most likely explanation, difference in food culture. Part of this would be because, for one thing, both societies are highly multicultural and multiracial. So there's not a single population group with like a relatively homogeneous, I guess, DNA grouping. Whereas noting that these are two possibly correlated things that appear just by coincidence. You know, eating turmeric is part of Indian food culture, and you know what, the Alzheimer's rates, this could be caused by something else entirely. It would seem much more likely to me that it's a coincidence rather than some very special vitamin or mineral that protects people against Alzheimer's. Now, I'm open to hearing any evidence that turmeric does contain a special vitamin or mineral, but considering there has not been any firm evidence that links these two things, I would say it's most likely that there is just a coincidence. Okay, deductive arguments. This I looked at in great detail in my last lecture, so I won't really go over it here in much detail. But I will give you a few short arguments and ask you to identify the correct deductive argument being used. You don't need to remember the names: modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism, disjunctive syllogism, dilemma, and reductio ad absurdum. I will list these on the test paper, so you don't need to memorize them. I'll also give you the little P, if P, then Q, P, therefore Q, something like that. I'll give you all of the formulas for the different deductive arguments. I'm interested more specifically in, if you know these deductive forms, can you recognize them when they are being used in an argument? So I will give you the deductive arguments, and I will give you some texts that use these deductive arguments, and you simply have to identify which deductive argument is being used. And that will be the end of the midterm exam. Now, this might seem like a lot, but when you actually get the test, I think you'll see that it's quite easy to complete all the questions within 75 minutes. When I put the test together, I very carefully calculate how many minutes I expect students to take on each section. And I do believe that students can realistically be expected to complete the test within 75 minutes without a great deal of pressure. So that's the goal. So just quickly remember that the midterm exam will be posted on Cyber Campus. This will be done electronically, so please bring a tablet or your laptop to class next Thursday. If you cannot bring a laptop or tablet to class for some reason, or if you just prefer to write by hand rather than use a keyboard, no problem. Just let me know and I'll bring some paper copies of the exam to class. Okay, this concludes my lecture previewing the midterm exam. If you have any questions about the midterm exam or anything else, please put your question in the group chat for our class on cacao work. That way, everyone will have the same information. I don't want any one student to have information that other students don't have and thus give them an unfair advantage. So please put any questions, especially regarding the midterm exam, in the group chat. And I do believe we are now at the end of our lecture. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. I hope you enjoy the time off for Easter. And I will see you next Thursday in our regular class, at our regular class time for the midterm exam. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.